Hey everyone, it's Mario and Sherman, and welcome to another episode of the Telos podcast where we speak with inspiring individuals to share their stories. Now, in today's segment, all right, I'm going to be doing the honors of interviewing my co host Sherman, who I think has got so much experience and so much to share with everyone. Sherms, why don't you go ahead and say a big hello to our entire audience?
Hello, everybody, and so good to be here again with you. This time on the other side of the table with Mario, and I'm really looking forward to share what God has put in my heart, put in my life, and allow me to go through, so that He can make a beautiful story out of. And I hope this encourages you. I hope this brings different tips to you, different nuggets of God's wisdom to all of us. And I also hope that through this, I will learn a lot more about myself, a lot more about God as well.
Amen. Friends, Sherman is someone. In fact, I would dare say this: he's not a stranger to many of us. Sometimes I say, from north, south, east, west, Sherman doesn't really take a rest. He's got his hands in so many things, which is why I think he has built a very strong worldview in terms of life and experience. And I'm just so looking forward to this dialogue between Sherman and myself. So, let's jump straight into it. Maybe Shams, could you just give us a broad overview um, of an introduction of yourself? Let's go slightly deeper, meaning to say, like over the last 10 years, you have been a pastor, you have been an entrepreneur, you are the vice president of Gatekeepers, which is a Christian marketplace organization. Maybe just share with us a quick, broad overview of your experience and your journey the last 10, 15 years.
Thanks, Mario. Okay, I'll do my best and try to keep it, as succinct as possible given the time of the podcast. But yeah, 2011, 2012 was a really, really critical year or years in my life. Demarking a milestone which I wouldn't say I'm very proud of. I mean, it was a season where I was, God was addressing some of the deep issues in my heart, in my spirit, and that is one of an orphan spirit. I was really carrying an orphan spirit, go through really a tough childhood, and I wouldn't go into detail for that story because some of it is on publications like Salt and Light and stuff like that. But suffice to say that it was a season where I had all this outward things going on, all this outward appearance, right? Had the cars, had nice apartment, traveling all over the place, doing good work and all that. But inside, deep in my heart, was this deep fear, this deep insecurity, and this deep hurt and pain as a result of a broken family. And what was manifesting outside was really just a form of security, which was pretty much hollow beneath. And so God had to address that. I was in finance at that time and enjoying a good, fairly good life. And what happened was that a financial crisis kind of hit me, a personal financial crisis hit me. And this was not during a financial crisis of any sort. I mean, the world was 2011, 2012 was going on pretty well. I mean, I didn't get affected at the GFC 2008. Prior to that, none of these financial difficulties affected me economically, except in 2011 and 2012 when the world was not facing any major financial crisis. So it was a very peculiar situation, and I basically overnight lost a lot of money, all right, some seven figures in Singapore dollar terms. And for a young person at the time, that really hurt me pretty bad. Now, another two other things that happened. One thing was that at the time, I had slowly learned how to love a girl properly. As in, and that's another story that I would tell. It's also available on the internet somewhere, of the story of how I subsequently then really come out of my shell and come out of this wrong worldview of what relationships was. But anyway, I let my gut down. I learned to be vulnerable at the same period of time. And I began to love this girl genuinely, like sincerely, and really being open, right? And what happened was within 3 months, I literally caught her pants down cheating on me, right? So picture this, right? A guy who's doing fairly well, but had all this outward facade, right? Very proud, very arrogant, all about the watches, the car, and all that. Show off, basically. Okay. And you can know why I'm not proud of that. Um, Suddenly, letting your gut down, being vulnerable, willing to be hurt, and was hurt, right? No less by a girl cheating on you, right? So it's a I don't know how many slaps on the face that amounts to, but certainly a tough one, right? So event number two. Event number three was my stepfather, who I was pretty much estranged from, calls me up and says he's got lung cancer, right? 6 months to live. So all that turmoil in my heart, all within a 6 month space, all these things happen, right? And I knew that the Lord was on to me. The Lord was getting my attention. Now, bearing in mind, as a Christian, I was worship leading at the time and all that stuff. So, I was doing all the right things, okay? But this sacred cow in my heart, I just did not give it to the Lord. So I was willing to submit, and I really took stock of my life, and God in his mercy, he sent 5 spiritual fathers to my life. One of them is now my father-in-law, but there were 4 others who were just so loving. And for the first time in my life, at that time I was in my early 30s, for the first time in my life, I learned how to be a son. And a sacred cow, which I talked about, of insecurity, of hurt and pain and rejection, abandonment, was slowly being placed at the altar. Not without tears, not without pain, but I was ready to be a son, to be loved by people in authority. So that's kind of big, quick summary of what happened in 2012, 2011, 2012, and then began a journey of restoration, redemption, up to today. And I'm still going through that process in many ways, and I'm enjoying it now because I know the fruits of that willingness to give all things, every single thing, to the Lord.
Wow. Sherman, I think, with that kind of broad summary of, what you went through over the last 10 years, when you spoke about your 3 crises, and it kind of frames up the topic that we want to go a bit deeper in today, which is essentially substance over form. And would you agree? I want you to share a bit more, right? Like, do you feel the world gets it in terms of substance over form, or is the world in a situation now where it's more bravado, it's more parade of so-called form over substance? That's my first question, right? Which one do you think it is? And number two, because you always refer to this orphan spirit, which I think is a refreshing term that people need to understand. So is there a way you can link the two? Like, again, the first part of my question was, which one is the world kind of like uh, gravitating towards, substance over form or form over substance? And what is the reason for that? Could it be this thing that you spoke about, as in the orphan spirit?
That's a powerful piece, Mario. That's a real, I think, very insightful question, very perceptive. And maybe what I can help is to then first kind of present what substance over form is to our audiences. Yeah? Shall we do that? And I'm
Sure.
going to read from a legal definition, right? And it's actually an accounting definition that you can find. And I'll read it to all of us just to give us a framework of what we're trying to talk about, right? And substance over form essentially means this: it is a concept that financial statements and accompanying disclosures of a business should reflect underlying realities of accounting practices. All right. So that's a definition. And conversely, the information appearing in the financial statements should not merely comply with the legal form in which they appear. In short, the recording of a transaction should not hide its true intent, which would mislead the readers of a company's financial statements. Okay, so that's the definition. I give one very quick example. Company A essentially is an agent for Company B, and so should only record a sale on behalf of Company B in the amount of the related commission, right? So if you sell 1 million, your commission is 100,000, you should record 100,000. However, Company A wants its sales to appear larger, so it records the entire 1 million, right? So that is a accounting kind of definition. And what it's saying here is this, right? I I think the world, again, I sometimes I hesitate because I don't know if I don't think I'm in a position to kind of make comments about what the world's going through. But my personal observation is this: right? We're so eager to impress, to get to a certain place. We do exactly what I just described in terms of the example, right? You actually have 10%, but you declare you got 100%, right? And then what the next going to happen is that you're going to try to keep up to the fact that you have promised someone 100% when you have, then you're going to make up the 90%, and that's that part about, when I draw that down from a personal point of view, it's really the insecurity, the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, right? If I take it from a personal level, right? I mean, you go into a party and everyone's kind of a certain level, maybe a certain social economic status, or they seem to be, right? And then you go there and you know that it's going to be like that, so you take a buy now pay later, right? Or you go borrow some money and you just put on the best suit you can get, your Armanis, your Zanias, your whatnot. You go there, but then you're gonna pay for it in the next 10 months. And it's gonna be very, very painful, right? But so what do you do that for? Because you want to fit in, because you fear that the people will reject you, right? In a company setting, right? For example, if you're a listed company, right? And listed companies have it really, really tough. Okay. I heard a CEO of a listed company mention this before. He got really fed up of being a listed company because he feels like every quarter, well, Singapore, you have quarterly reporting. He feels like every quarter he's running for elections. It's a painful process. And so what happens? So sometimes when we don't meet the mark and or our remuneration are pegged to a certain share price performance, etc., right? Then we are forced to, we'll move into a position where we are tempted to put form over substance, right? For example, over declaring or trying to say, okay, I'll declare this now, and maybe next year when I retire, the next year go pick up this stuff, right? So I mean, these are examples that when I describe them, I think you might not find them unfamiliar, right? And so rather than say what the world is, I think I'll leave you to make observations and decide, what you think the world's headed, right? And look at the financial crimes that are happening, look at things that are blowing up, what's really going on. And again, ask ourselves, what's the reason, and should this be the way, and where are we headed if we carry this on? Because once trust is broken, it's really tough. It's really, really tough. And I think God doesn't need us, right? God doesn't need us to over present ourselves. I mean, Jesus came down in the most humblest form. I don't know if my English is good enough, but yeah, humblest form possible, right? I mean, without any pomp and fancy, he really created such an impact on this earth. I mean, he was the king of the Jews riding on a donkey, right? So the thing is this, he had the substance, right? The form came later, right? I mean, it wasn't that he was without form either, right? People were, breaking a year's wages worth of perfume at his feet. People were giving him money. He was well resourced, right? I mean, he traveled with an entourage with his disciples. So I mean, Jesus wasn't without form. Don't get me wrong. I believe he's a man of abundance, which he has. I mean, the feeding of the 5,000 was an example. Jesus himself was a man that always provided more than enough. He had more than enough, but the substance was the one that brought it up. And so I just thought to myself over the last few months, and I'll probably write it in a blog of sorts, that if we would focus on the substance and be so assured that God will back us up, even if we are 10% today, we'll get to 100% in his timing, without pain, without any sorrow, but full of joy.
Shams, I think you really expressed that beautifully. Essentially, when I pose a question about substance over form over substance, you say, okay, leave it to the observation. But I dare say, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm in the marketplace, that many people kind of value form over substance, whether they know it or not, whether they are intentional about it or not, whether they are, directly, indirectly. Chances are, well, let's talk about the business world first. We can go into so many other spheres, that many people tend to value form over substance. And correct me if I'm wrong, right? Would you say that it does stem from when we use the word orphan spirit, and just now you use the words, because people are either fear of failure, they want to fit in, they fear the abandonment, bro? But that is really so real. It really is. So how would someone kind of conquer that? What are some of the angles we can speak about in terms of, yeah, Sherman makes sense, but now that I have the awareness that that's what I'm doing, and I shouldn't really be doing that, because by doing that we are kind of focusing on short-term perspective, right? What are some of the handles that you can share with people, how not to do that, how not to prioritize over that? Because man, we are living in the real world, bro. How the key is the how.
Yeah, love it, bro. And Mario, I really enjoy our podcast together because you're just such a perceptive person, such a perceptive interviewer, if I could say, amazing. And our audiences, we are so blessed to have Mario with us on this podcast. It's the right time to give him a round of applause, okay? And yes, Mario, I mean, how you see, when I crashed financially in that period of time, and these 5 spiritual fathers came into my life, I will tell you that not a single one of them came to give me money. My problem was financial, right? Our logic is that, okay, look for a financial solution, right? But these five people who changed my life, none of them gave me money. Well, except for maybe one who on my birthday maybe sometimes gave me a love gift, right? But that aside, and that was nothing compared to the losses I had, right? So the thing is this: at that time, I had really surrendered that whole part of my life. In fact, that area of my life, I was like, God, I've messed up, right? And I really need um you to kind of address what is the root issue, because I'm at a stage of my life. I think I still can recover, but I don't want to ever make this mistake ever again. Not in my later years, not especially when I start to have a family. No, not at all. Like let's resolve this like now once and for all. Put me on the right path, right? And so the 2 years after I crashed, financially, the 2 years, these five spiritual fathers, they took time just to meet with me, have a drink with me, talk to me, preach the word to me, and strengthen me. They also encouraged me to have time of solitude with the Lord. And I can tell you, bro, this is a very important bit. I want to talk a little bit about this because, you want to draw from the vine, John 15, right? But you don't want to spend time in the vineyard. It's not going to match up, right? Again, substance over form, right? And they encourage me that, in your time of solitude, that's where, in your pain, in your tears, on your knees, that's where you're going to meet God. And that's where God is going to say to you the things that you need to say, not even any of your spiritual fathers will know and understand and can say. So that time of solitude was very important. I can give you an example. One of the things that my spiritual fathers told me to do, one of my spiritual fathers told me to do, was to forgive my enemies and bless them. At the time, Matthew chapter 5. And it was a time where, as because I was also a proud, I was brash, and I let's just say I pissed some people off, and some of them were in authority figures, and also some, well, they just heard some things about me, and then they kind of really really dragged me through the mud. And I remember one meeting when I was at a meeting, and this particular senior pastor, he said some really harsh things to my face, and really pretty hurt me pretty bad. And I smiled at him. I didn't react. I came back, and this was just after my spiritual father told me that I need to learn to forgive, not just forgive, but also bless my enemies, right? Came back home, got on my knees. I can tell you, bro, I wept and I just blessed that pastor, right? I blessed him with my mouth. Now, this is the part where the substance in my heart did not match up. But I was willing to let the form take precedent. I was willing to let the form go ahead of the substance. In other words, right, I was just blessing with my mouth, blessing this pastor. My heart couldn't feel it. But bro, within 3 months of doing that, my heart matched up. The next time I saw this pastor, I could give him a hug genuinely. I could bless him. I could pray for him. I blessed his ministry, and I really wanted him to do well. Whenever I knew he was facing difficult things, I would pray for him, and genuinely hope that he has good success. Now, a few things here. I'm not suggesting that, although I let my mouth, the substance, the form of it take precedent. I'm not saying that that's always, we apply that across everything, right? That means we spend the money first, and then I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, I'm saying that you see, the way I think is that I'm trying to get my heart to match up with my words, and even in difficult times, you can encourage yourself. David encouraged himself in the Lord. He was blessing the Lord. Did he feel like blessing the Lord? He didn't feel like blessing the Lord. But he was praising the Lord even in his downtime. Right when he came back from the battle, and the Amalekites had taken his family and his possessions and all that, the first thing he did was he went to worship God, right? So did he feel like it? I don't know. I don't think, dude. I mean, like, if your family is gone and your possessions are gone, there's no way you feel like cussing, maybe, right? But you don't feel like saying anything. But David went and prayed. He went to worship God and waited for God, And you see, and God, of course, subsequently went to tell him to go pursue, overtake, and recover all, right? And which David did. So the thing is this. So when I'm just want to be very clear that I was just trying to do that same thing that David was doing, because a broken and a contrite spirit God will not despise. Psalm 51, I believe. So I was trying to do it, but the thing I want to highlight here is this: it took me 3 months. 3 months, bro, just to forgive this one pastor, and I did that with many people that I had hurt, and also who hurt me. And some I could ask for forgiveness, and some Well, today we're still working through things through, which I'm saddened by it, but I know that that I'm not in heaven yet, so there's still it's not over yet. We're still gonna pursue that, right? So I mean, you see, having substance over form is also understand that sometimes when these things happen, there is consequence. Right, the wages of sin, there is consequence to our actions, to our mistakes and stuff like that. Though we believe in faith, God will redeem, but the last thing we want to do is to focus on the form. And yes, God will redeem, God will redeem. Like you, we don't ask the how, right? We don't go through that process, And I can tell you for that 2 years, when after I had lost everything, right? So how so-called like really terrible. And I'm so glad my wife actually witnessed it, because at that time she didn't like me for good reason as well. And she saw me really come crashing down and then building my life up again. And therefore, I think she married me, seeing the tenacity there. But for 2 years, bro, I can tell you for 2 years, 2013, 14, even up to about 15, every business door I had tried to open slammed shut in my face. Right?
Mm.
So I had a financial problem. The issue wasn't financial. The issue was that orphan heart. And it took me 2 years and a lot of love from my spiritual fathers to overcome that. And subsequently, 2015, I managed to do a small little deal, and things started to move on, and started businesses and all that, and doors started to open, and it is where it is today. The point being this, right? Even today, I don't want to lose focus of that 2 years that I went through. It's always going to be substance over form. And I can tell you that today, every single door that God has opened to me, the businesses that I have right now, that God has asked me to steward right now, none of it is related to my previous training. And it's a miracle. That's nothing but a miracle. And at this very same time, I hold it loosely and trust that I will steward this to the best of my ability, right? And until such time where God says it's time to move, and I will move, right? And I will obey the voice of the Lord. So the focus for me is now this, right? The big difference in that 2 years was this. I came from a place from striving, trying to make things work, trying to target the next car, trying to, present a certain mode of success, a certain phase of success. In the 2 years, all I want to do is to have God delight over me and love my family and my friends around me. Right. So again, I realize that has actually brought a lot of fruitfulness in my life, because our destinies are tied to people. It's a topic for another day, right? But and sometimes people are hard to love, right? All the time in fact, all the time they're hard to love. I speak for myself. Sometimes I wonder how my wife loves me too. Can be quite a pain. But the thing is this, right? The thing is this. It's focused on what is the substance. Do we truly believe that it is God who gives us the ability to get wealth, or is God who gives us hands and we have the ability to get wealth? It's actually a very subtle difference, right? Right? God has given us hands, but it's still God who has given us the ability, not our hands that make wealth, right? So our hands are the action pieces, but we must not forget the substance over the form.
Man, you know what, bro? After this podcast is done, I'm actually going to be rewatching it myself again. In just that the last 5 minutes that you spoke. Now, obviously, we agree that it has to be substance over form. But the way in that one example that you so beautifully articulated, right? That when you say my mouth has to speak, and we don't want the audience to think that, oh, so is Sherman trying to say form over substance? Not really, but it is the form is drawing from the wellspring of substance. Hence, the mouth speaks. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So I think that was beautiful, bro. Sometimes like you may not want to bless your enemies, like how in the world this guy backstabbed me? I don't want to do it. But knowing that God is my substance, so to speak, that I'm drawing from that wellspring of substance, okay, my mouth has got to bend to that. And over time, all right, the fountain of life will really just spring forth. I want to ask you this question, okay? When your 5 mentors kind of brought you through the process, because you mentioned that you were in huge financial difficulties, and naturally everyone who hears that will be thinking, that is my first prerogative that I've got to solve. But when they bring you through a process, can you share maybe one or two things that kind of stood out for you? Like probably at the start, it wouldn't make sense. Like, hey man, I need money now. And only one mentor gave you money on your birthday. Probably didn't make sense to you then. But could you share one or two things in that journey that we can kind of like learn from about that process of substance. So let me give an example. Okay, so you mentioned, could it be relationship, because you had to go around, trying to mend relationships with people, asking for forgiveness, bro? That is not easy, leh. Number one, why that? And number two, just one or two more things about the journey that your mentors kind of asked you to do, lah. And right now you are actually bearing fruit of that journey, lah.
Well, Maria, that's a big question and a good one as well. I would say it like this. I mean, I don't think all of them were very prescriptive, to be honest. Um, Frankly, yeah, not all, no, I wouldn't say all of them were. In fact, in terms of telling me what to do, I would say it was maybe 10% of our conversations. Really, and that's again very typical of maybe a Singaporean culture. We're always looking for solutions, things to do, and all that. But what they did for me was this, was to father me and tell me stories. What they did was just to really tell me stories. And I sat at their feet and just listen and listen and listen and listen, bring it back to the Lord, thought about it, process it with the Lord. You see, and this is where this area of solitude is very important. So that's something that I did. Of course, I mean, on the practical side, I also took whatever work that I could get, I mean, and I did things from like even copywriting to worship leading. And I'll confess to you, at the time there were certain places that would kind of give us an honorarium for people to lead worship at certain places, and I would put my hands up and just do it, right? Like whatever I have skill that the Lord will do. I mean, some doors are not opening, so okay, fine. I just keep looking, and I would just do it. So I took some of these worship leading sessions because I kind of needed the money, right? And they're not a lot of money, but it was enough for me to at least get by for that period of time. But again, I wasn't so focused on that. I mean, I knew at the back of my head I had these things and these financial situations I need to kind of resolve and uncover and unwind, but not to say I was being irresponsible, but what I focused on what the Lord allowed me to do and had me do, which was little things. And then at the same time, really come to a place of, surrenderedness, lah, I would say. I'll be honest with you, and I'll confess this out. Sometimes it's like I never thought I was a pastor. And I never thought I was a pastor. And because I always found it more sexy to be in a marketplace. Right, like who wants to be a pastor when you can be a businessman, right? I mean, no offense to pastors, but I am one now, so I'm an ordained pastor too, as much as I am a businessman. So here where I'm coming from, and I learned to appreciate that place. So, and I'll tell you stories about that. And at that time, as I, surrendered, my stepfather, as I mentioned, you had lung cancer. He subsequently passed on, and he was a pastor of a church. And one of my reconciliation piece was I promised him on his deathbed that I will take care of his son, my younger brother, and the church, right? And subsequently, I then worked on to become ordained and pastored the church full time for a good 7 years. So I think it's something that I wasn't willing to do, but because I knew that was necessary in the act of reconciliation, and I did it. Of course, I prayed about it. I sought counsel about it, and it led to that, and I did it. Right. So the thing is, sometimes I think when we are surrendered to the Lord will bring us on journeys that we're not comfortable with, that we're unfamiliar with. And till today, recently I we always start the year with a 21-day fast, and we're coming to the end of the 21-day fast. And during the fast, God really will surface things because your body is really weak. And one of the things that came up to me was, again, the issue of security, identity, right? And so, you see, it's not, the devil is very subtle. He's a liar, and that's what he does for a living. He lies to people, okay? So the need for form over substance is also a lie. Let me put it this way. And the devil will do all he can to make you believe that, right? So I during this fast, those issues of identity started to come up again, and I'm so glad I had a band of brothers that would talk to me about it. And I quickly learned within a few moments, right after one of them spoke with me, I quickly learned that once I feel that, the place to be is in the bosom of our Heavenly Father, right? Just go to Him and hear His voice. And I can tell you that now it's every time I feel inadequate, I feel insecure, that first place I go to is the lap of my Heavenly Father. And I can tell you that the delight and the love that I feel makes it it just turns things straight away turns things to a better place, you know. And I'm now very comfortable, you know. When I kind of dropped, when I kind of, you know, moved into a different phase where I was focusing on a business. I kind of didn't really want to be known as a pastor because I didn't want people to misunderstand what I was doing. As it is, explaining my business is already very difficult, you know. So I didn't want to have more things to explain. But I recently learned, this is very new to me also, that I need to be comfortable with the fact that God has called me to be a pastor, whether in the marketplace, in my family, or in a church. You know, and one example of this is like this. I was out on a business trip recently, and on the last day, we're at the lobby having a few drinks, and one of them asked me about my business experiences, you know, and asked me how I overcome challenges and stuff like that. And I always take that as an invitation to preach, lah. You know, and I took the offer. I went on 1.5 hours. I was preaching the gospel to this group of four people, you know, and the takeaway at the end of it, they said to me, we all need faith as an anchor.
Mm.
They start to, you see, everything that they understood was I work with my hands, I strive, I try to, you know, present something. They came away thinking that faith is an anchor. And my question to them is that let God speak to you, you know. And so I've learned that actually because of that heart for people, right? The sharing of the gospel becomes a very natural place. So the identity comes to come out. So the identity starts to come up. So the all that to share, you know, the fact that in that 2 years, you know, in fact in the last few years, the thing that God has really put in my heart is this, right? Is coming back to sonship, coming back to being, you know, we all see this picture about God and us, and we have this teddy bear that God is asking us to surrender to him so he can give us a bigger teddy bear and stuff like that. You know, we all remember that picture. I get that picture is really, really, really real, you know. And the only way you can give your teddy bear to the Lord is that you know and you trust that he's got the best plans for you. And that can only come with relationship. That can only come actually with fighting battles together. And oftentimes, well, never mind we fight with each other, we fight battles with each other. Actually, we also sometimes learn to fight with we'll fight alongside each other. But you know, one day I would like to share a message really about how we fight with God alongside us. You know, and that's something that builds a lot of trust with God and us. You know, and that time, and it just happened that in that 2 years, God, through the 5 spiritual fathers I had, he modeled his love for me. He modeled the ability to trust. I mean, these 5 were not perfect people, right? They had a lot of idiosyncrasies. They had a lot of failures themselves. There were things that they didn't do well. But, you know, they carried one thing so well, and that was representing the father heart of God. And that was all I needed at that moment. I didn't need all the other stuff. I didn't need them to show me that they're very successful. You know, I didn't need them to show me they had many things. And I just needed them to reflect the heart of the Father. And I think with that, you know, and now when I do my business, I have the same approaches. Right. Recently, my assistant was very cute. I mean, we had received a quote from a supplier, and the quote was obviously wrong because the supplier had omitted certain things, right? And my assistant was like, "Oh, we should just take this quote because, you know, then we can make more money, right?" When I said to her, I said, "Look, I mean, I think that's what normal people would do, right? But we're a Christian business, right? Let's go back to the supplier, tell her, like, missing this line item. Let's do that." Also, last year, I mean, in one of the contracts, the supplier had also kind of, you know, quoted a certain price, and when we were about to finally sign off, I start to sense that he was really struggling to give that price, you know, because he really wanted to do the business. And so I told him, I said, "Hey, Eric, you know, why don't you do this? Tell me, is this really a tight spot for you, right?" And he said, "Yeah, it's a little bit tight." I said, "Okay, let's increase your quote by another 5%, right? Just give you the space to breathe, you know." So, I mean, for me, it wasn't so much that, and some people can say, "Yeah, because you're giving away your father's stuff, right?" You don't feel anything. But maybe it is, you know, maybe it is, but maybe, or maybe certainly, God loves Eric as much as he loves me. Why should I take advantage of a brother? Right? Maybe he doesn't know Jesus yet, but what if I could use this to share the gospel with this guy? Right? It's okay. Right? So that because I've learned that even through, I mean, it was a very big hole I had to fill at a time when I crashed, and it was big enough for me to like, you know what, I just don't know what to do anymore. But God has been faithful. God has been faithful, and it has been faithful in the most non-obvious way, if it's the way I'll put it, you know. And that to me is an adventure in faith that I want to encourage every entrepreneur, every person to go on to. You know, I mean, the world will tell you, okay, you got to go and do your pitch deck this way. You got to go and, you know, have a, make sure your TAM and your SAM and all these things are all there and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, do all that, you know, but that's not going to get you your funding. That's not going to get you your, you know, business success, right? The Lord makes rich and he adds no sorrow to that. You know, the no sorrow piece is a highly critical piece of information, and it's actually highly desirable. Maybe, but as we're getting older, I don't know, Mario, about you, but for me, I don't want sorrow, man. You know, I mean, like, make a little bit less in cash, it's fine because I earn a lot more in heavenly currency. You know what I mean? But sorrow is painful, so I think that whole understanding that and being assured of the love of the Father, and I've experienced it like firsthand a million times over. Still have disappointments, still have the challenges, but that love of the Father is powerful, bro. And I think as business owners, we really need to understand the love of. Otherwise, you'll be milking everything around you, your employees, your suppliers, everything you'll be trying to squeeze. And you know, when you squeeze, when you get so used to squeezing things, you become very skinny, you know, and that's not a good place to be, right? So you know, that's really the heart of of really what I've been experiencing in the last years.
That is fantastic. You know, in all that sharing and all the multiple examples you gave, one word that really was just springing into my mind is this word called relationship. You know, relationship with God being number one, and out of that flowing a relationship with other people. You know, because our God is a giving God, right? Through that relationship, He gives. Because if we don't, if relationships are broken, bro, don't you feel that instead of giving, you want to get? It's totally topsy-turvy, right? The world is obviously that because there's lack of relationship, two things happen. Number one, we tend to want to get. And number two, we actually put on a mask. We want to value form over substance, which is why we are inauthentic. We are not vulnerable. You know, so from that, what I'm gleaning from all your examples is that relationship is key. Would you say so? That relationship is key in all of life?
Yeah, bro. I mean, I really want to build on what you just said, and that is Jesus came to restore relationship with the Father. You see, we forget, right? We think that Jesus is our ticket to heaven, and we accept him so we can go to heaven. But let's again move away from the form and get to the substance. Jesus came so that he can reconcile us to the Father, and that's his purpose, right? Not forgetting that, you know, he didn't. The cross is in a way the form of it, right? And we wear crucifix or we crosses all over the houses. That's a form of it. The substance of that really is bringing us into relationship with the Father. And relationship with someone is not like, you know, only going to someone when you need help. Relationship with the Father is really that communion, that conversation. And I'm still learning this, right? And the most beautiful thing I have now is when I have a business challenge, the first thing I go is, Father, what do you think about this? How do I resolve this? Sometimes he talks to me, sometimes he brings people to talk to me. And I love that adventure because maybe I'm a bit of a creative person, and I don't like things that are too, you know, rudimentary. I like to kind of like just have it, you know, mix it up a little bit. So it's really fun. And I still don't get it right. Okay, I tell you that, you know, I still don't get it right. But I know that because of relationship, sometimes Mario, I might be late, but you're not gonna piss off with me if I'm late a little bit. You know, I feel you a little bit, but you know, because we know where our hearts are, right? So yeah.
I love it. Sherms, you know, in all your journey and all your sharings, right? Can I just ask you this one final thing? Are there any 2 or 3 points that you would love to share with people, you know, at the current season that you're in? For people who are going through like similar challenges or darkness, it's not a good time in the world today, right? Everyone is going through a VUCA time, so to speak. What are some 2 or 3 points that you can share with everyone to take away for people who are going through similar challenges, similar darkness, that you can just inspire them, encourage them with, bro?
Well, bro, yeah, that's so the scripture that comes to mind as you ask this question is Hebrews 11, right? And in line with this topic, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence not seen. And where your substance from is where your faith is, right? If your faith is in yourself or even your friends to make things work, then that is your substance, and you're limited by what your faith is anchored upon, right? So, and I've been guilty of this. Sometimes I think when I have a problem, my friends are my solution. I depend on my friends to help me. Well, that's not entirely wrong, and there's a place for that. But if your faith is that, then that's your limitation. But if your faith is on the Creator God who owns the heaven and the earth, who's infinite, who's sovereign, right? Who's omnipotent, who's everywhere, omnipresent, then your substance is now anchored upon this capacity, is the way I'll put it. And the beauty of it, right, is this capacity is ever present. This capacity is always available, and this capacity is unlimitless. Or sorry, it's limitless rather. This capacity is limitless. Maybe you have to edit that. So when you understand that, right, I think your way of getting out of difficult situations will then, the way I say it is this way. If you understand that faith is the substance of things hoped for, and the substance that your faith is anchored upon is upon a Father God who created all the whole earth, the whole universe, who created everything, who's omnipresent, omnipotent, then your belief system will start to reflect that. And if your belief system starts to reflect this, your thinking will start to be along those lines. And because your thinking is along those lines, your actions, your decisions will be a result of that thinking. So I would say that, there's so many, because difficult times are very, I would say unique to every person. Every person goes through a very different scenario, and it's very hard to kind of, but I think where your faith is important. And sometimes, again, when I want to talk about substance over form, is sometimes we hear messages, when very often when we go through difficult things, we hear messages or listen to worship music, right? We generally do that, some of us, right? And then we hear a sermon, and then we hear a nice tagline, and we try to act on it and all that, or, but the thing is this, I mean, the thing is that putting into action a redemptive journey starts from where your faith is anchored in, and it's what you believe in. So my encouragement is this, is that you would really build that relationship with the Lord, build that faith journey with the Lord. And then the evidence, you see, that scripture is beautiful to me because, well, faith is a substance. That substance is infinite, of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. Evidence is not, I would say, it's not a limited thing, it's not a finite thing, is the way I was, yeah. Evidence can increase. Have you been to a crime scene, or if you watch CSI or any one of these crime stories, right? Sometimes they discover new evidence as we go along the way. And your faith journey is like that, right? As faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence that are not seen, and then you discover them, you will start to increase, right? So you discover, oh, actually, so it's not seen today. Tomorrow, because of your faith journey, you see this evidence. There's still more evidence that is not seen, and you carry on, and so that place of growth, I believe, comes from that also, no matter how difficult a time that you've gone through. And so I just want to encourage all of us with that. Hopefully, Mario, I've said it, well enough. I may not have been so, proficient in that part, but yeah.
Bro, you said it beautifully. When you quote Hebrews 11, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Some people may think, oh, so I'm supposed to have faith when there is no evidence, which is not true. If we look at it again in the second part, the evidence of things not seen doesn't mean it's not there. It's just you have not seen it yet. It is there, but evidence of things not seen. And which is why it's so crucial, when you said, and then when you go on to discover it after a while, it then strengthens your faith again because it was there, it's just that you didn't see it at that moment in time. Faith is such an, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to do a part 2 about this, okay? Because I think that was a fantastic something that you open up faith. This is a bit of my sharing, bro, that we all have faith in something, okay? We all derive meaning, we all form our worldview on something. Okay, whether is it our family, and when you talk to people, you more or less we can start to see, okay, certain things are very important to them, right? Either, okay, money is very important to me, my family is very important to me, my business is very important to me, God is very important to me. Many people kind of build their worldview or their meaning around something. Could be their environment, the way they've been brought up, right? But at the end of the day, when we build our faith on the unshakable cornerstone on Christ, that becomes our substance on which all forms will then start to sprout and bear fruit. Right. So Sherman, I think I want to really thank you for that wonderful sharing that you have given us. Really enjoyed the session with you. I'm personally going to be watching the podcast again right after this is done, man. So thank you, Sherman, for sharing all that nuggets of wisdom with all of us.
Thank you, Mario. And for our audiences out there, I just want to tell you that it's Mario's wedding anniversary today as we are recording this. So if you can send him some cheers, some love, some hugs. Him and Charlene are celebrating, was it 16 years of marriage?
16th anniversary, that's right, brother.
Anniversary, all right? They started when they were 14. So, it's a great milestone there. So thank you, Mario, for having me, especially on your wedding anniversary. Please go back to your wife soon.
Man. Thank you, Sherman. I love you, brother. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Telos podcast where I interviewed Sherman, my wonderful brother and co-host. All right, so this is the Telos podcast, your reason for being. I hope you guys enjoy it, share it with all your friends. And after you hear Sherman's story, may it encourage you to write yours as well. So this is Mario and Sherman signing off. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Telos podcast. Always remember your reason for being. See you at the next episode.